Hello wonderful person, this is Anton, and in today's video we're going to go to Saturn and visit one of its incredible moons known as Titan. We're going to talk about why Titan might actually be the best option for us to settle on another object in the solar system, and why Titan is really what we should be trying to colonize. Anyway, welcome to What the Math. In a very recent paper by Amanda Hendricks and Yuk Young, a paper published in August of 2017, they talk about just that. They talk about why we should actually be looking at Saturn and specifically the colonization of its moon Titan that we're going to right now. And the fact that we can actually establish a colony of approximately 300 million people here. And it shouldn't be that difficult because Titan already has a lot of the things that we need to survive. So first of all, if you know nothing about Titan, it's a moon of Saturn. It's the largest moon of Saturn, and it's one of the largest moons in our solar system. And it's actually bigger than our own moon. And as you can see from the refraction of the sun, it has a very thick atmosphere. The atmosphere here is actually even thicker than on Earth. It's about 1.3 atmospheres, or even though it actually says 1.6 here. But the problem is that it consists of mostly nitrogen and methane, meaning that because of that, it's actually kind of cold here. But that's not really a problem. The only problem that Titan has is that it's cold. But on the other hand, if we were to go inside of this atmosphere and if we were to actually try to explore what's underneath of it, and we can actually just do that by removing the clouds from Titan. Okay, that didn't help us. We can also maybe remove the actual atmosphere. And so what you kind of see now is it actually has quite a lot of liquid on the surface. Now, it's not liquid water. It's actually liquid methane and ethane, but it does have liquid, which is very unusual for our solar system. Here, so there is actually at least one lake right there. Because it's the only object that we know of that actually has active liquid, we think that there's a lot of possibility for creation of various types of energy here. So for one, you could actually use this liquid that I'm about to land into. You could use this liquid to create what's known as hydro energy. Basically, if we can somehow make this thing fall due to gravity, we can create similar hydroelectric dams that we have on Earth. So that's one example of how we can create energy here. Second of all, because this is actually methane and ethane, these are highly energetic molecules, and on Earth we use them for all kinds of combustion. Now here we can't really combust anything because there is no oxygen, but we could produce oxygen using all kinds of electricity-based reactions. Specifically, we're talking about electrolysis, which could be done by creating water or finding water here. And so if we can create oxygen, we could then use combustion to turn a lot of this stuff into chemical energy. So in other words, we can create factories that will produce a lot of energy simply by burning all of this material that is super plenty here. There's a lot of this stuff. And also because there's a bit of a wind in the upper atmosphere, so even though we don't see it here, if I re-enable the atmosphere here, you'll see that there's actually some wind in the upper atmosphere, and we could use this for so-called wind energy. So we could actually produce energy even from the wind on this moon, which is actually quite interesting especially because the gravity here is much lower, so it's easier for objects to get higher into the upper atmosphere. So far we have three unique ways of producing energy. It's hydropower, it's wind power, and of course chemical power. We can also use solar energy here. Now, even though the sun is quite far away, solar energy is very, very efficient. So if we could somehow cover about 10% of the surface here with solar panels, we could actually produce enough energy to power a 300 million people colony without really ever running into shortage. And lastly, you could also use nuclear energy, or if we don't find any nuclear materials here, we can actually use what's known as geothermal energy, but here it might be more difficult because the actual surface and the actual inside of this object are relatively similar in temperature, so geothermal energy would not be as efficient. Since this moon has so many different ways of producing energy that we already are aware of, it's actually a perfect opportunity for us to think about how we could actually one day not only land here, but colonize this object. Now, so far we only had one robotic landing. This was the Huygens probe that landed here in early 2000s. But if we can make an actual landing with people, if we can actually bring people here and if we can try to create a colony, the scientists behind this paper are quite convinced that we'll find a tremendous amount of resources here that we can exploit for energy purposes, and this could technically be a completely ready to live on colony for us. Now, because the atmosphere is so thick, we're actually quite protected from various radiations on the surface. And the magnetic field, which is not present on this moon, is present from Saturn. So Saturn does protect us from some types of energy, but even though there is a bit of radiation on the surface, the actual thickness of the atmosphere takes care of the most dangerous types. So living on the actual surface shouldn't be a problem. Okay, there's one problem. And that problem, of course, is that, and let me just re-enable clouds here, is that, well, first of all, it's not exactly an Earth-like environment. Yeah, it has atmosphere so we can walk around, but it's very, very cold. There's nothing to breathe for us, and for the most part, it's not a very hospitable world and not hospitable looking either. But despite all of this, despite the cold and despite the fact that we don't have any prepared or ready-to-breathe materials, this would be the easiest to colonize simply because of the atmosphere that's already there, simply because of the amount of energy we can create with relatively simple processes, and of course because it's an object that will allow us to not only land here easily, because we can basically use parachutes and aerobrake into land, but also escape it easily because the gravity here is relatively low, so you don't need as much materials to escape from here and to return back to Earth. So for all intents and purposes, Titan is actually probably the best target for colonization by human species. So we might need to forget about Mars for now, because we don't really know how to terraform it just yet. This is already a quite interesting world to visit, and we could definitely survive here as long as we bring enough oxygen and find a way to replenish our oxygen stocks using electrolysis, and as long as we can actually bring warm enough jackets to survive. So Titan might be the first colony for the human race, as long as we find a way to convince the space agencies to focus on this instead of Mars. Anyway, so that's a little bit about Titan and a little bit about the paper published on July of 2017. And hopefully now you know a little bit more about how to create various types of energy on this beautiful moon. Come back tomorrow to learn something else. Subscribe if you still haven't, and share this video with someone who enjoys watching space and educational videos. I'll see you guys tomorrow, space out, and as always, bye bye.